Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Hilary Coleman. I'm a current university senior lecturer, but I'm also a past school teacher. And because I've worked full-time permanently on both sides of the school to uni transition, I really want to make sure that you have everything you need to know about uni. It can be really challenging for a student and their family when that person is first headed off to uni. And this video in particular is about something that trips a lot of students up and can cause a lot of pain and disappointment. So I'm really hoping that this is going to help many of you out, so that you can have the smoothest transition as possible. This video is on how much time will study take, really. All right, let's jump in. So let's imagine you are taking a full-time study load. That's usually 4 units in a particular offering. Many of you will have semester 1 and semester 2 as you're starting out. So I've called these units 1, 2, 3, and 4. That is usually a full-time study load. Interestingly, if you go and have a look at the unit outline for each of your units, a unit is like a subject, and the unit outline is like the governance document for each of your units or each of your subjects. They will tell you all of the learning activities and many other things on top of that too. So for example, what assessments do you need to know? Are there compulsory attendance requirements? Do you have to get certain marks in certain assessment tasks? Do you need a lab coat? Is there going to be a field trip? All kinds of things like that. We will have another video on unit outlines. They're really important, but they will give you all of the information about what types of learning activities you will have in each of your units. And in this one, for example, which I have, I guess, unimaginatively called Unit 1 here, let's say this is an example. They have a 2-hour lecture, a 1-hour tutorial, and a 2-hour workshop. I've used words here that are really commonly used in university studies, so lecture, tutorial, and workshop are really general but common terms no matter what unit you happen to be taking. But for example, you might be taking commerce or business or law or medicine or ancient history or nursing or many other things, and they may have their own learning activities associated with them. So for example, if you're studying science, maybe your workshop might be replaced by a laboratory, for example. Or if you're doing architecture, you might have a design studio. If you're doing medical or biomedical science or medicine, you might have clinical practice, and so on and so forth. You'll notice that these timetabled hours add up to 5 hours per week. So the learning activities for this particular unit only add up to 5 hours. That doesn't mean that there is only 5 hours of study per week for that unit though. Usually a particular unit across an undergraduate degree is roughly advertised at having 150 hours of work that's required. That's the volume of learning, the amount of work that a student has to do, and that's oftentimes spread out amongst the 15 weeks of a semester. So if you have 150 hours of work to do and there's 15 hours a semester, that means you've got roughly 10 hours per unit that you should be doing. And 5 of them have been structured for you in this unit. These are these learning activities, the lecture, the tut, and the workshop. But that means you've got another 5 hours of individual study that each student needs to put in themselves. Now, you don't have to come up with that on your own. Usually the unit outline for that unit will tell you what you need to do. They're suggesting you've got 1 hour of reading associated with the lecture that you do, 1 hour both before and after the tutorial that you do, and then an hour of workshop preparation. And then a final, you'll work out that adds up to 9, a final 1 hour working for assessments. Now that maybe it doesn't sound like much, only 1 hour for assessments a week, but usually what they're saying is if you've done the other 9 hours of study, then that also contributes to that. So this is an idea for one particular unit, for example. So let's actually put this into a weekly timetable, and I really recommend you do this. A lot of these videos are to help you with your soft skills or your organisational skills. And so you can see here, I've got a weekly timetable, Monday through Friday, and starts at 9 a.m. So this is the 9 till 10 block, here's the 10 to 11 block, here's the 11 till 12 block. So finally we have a 5 till 6 block at the end. You'll notice I haven't put anything out of hours here, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be studying flexibly if you don't want to. Loads of people have carers responsibilities. Almost 100% of students will have some kind of paid work that they're doing or volunteer work. Obviously, you're all trying to keep yourselves healthy as well, so you've probably got some exercise and seeing friends, meditation, socialising, all those kinds of things that you need to fit in as well. But I'm really just trying to put the timetable on here so we can visualise exactly how much study it will take. The other thing I'm going to flag is you might have some choice over this. So let's say you're in a unit that's got 400 students in it. There's probably only going to be one once-off lecture that might be held in a big lecture hall with everybody. But this 1 hour tut that you can see here, or the 2-hour workshop that you can see here that I've got scheduled from 12 till 2 for this first unit, it might be that you might get some choices around when to do that, because there might be more than one iteration or more than one offering. The key thing about that is that you want to get into your timetabling as soon as possible, because it means you're going to get your first preference. So for example, there's a tute that this student has enrolled in or allocated into, but maybe there was an option to have it straight after the lecture, or perhaps at 1, or perhaps right before the workshop. If there are a bunch of different options, the best way to get your preference is to get in early and allocate as soon as possible. But nevertheless, this is when this student has chosen to fit in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. Now, it did say there was another 5 hours of study. So I'm also at this point going to put this somewhere on my timetable. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is a good idea, because at the moment on Monday, this student is starting at 10 and going through till the start of 5 p.m. or bang on 5 p.m. with no breaks. They can't go to the bathroom, they're not allowed to drink some water, they're not allowed to eat any lunch. Obviously, that's not a good idea, but you really want to start being able to visualize exactly how much work is required when you're doing something like this. The other thing I'm going to say about this is there are a lot of universities out there that are starting to advertise that they can stack your learning activities on a handful of days. So rather than having the lecture, the tute and the workshop spread out, they might say that for all of your units, you can fit all of the learning activities from Monday to Wednesday. And that is really great. I can totally see why that's helpful, particularly if you're trying to fit other things in, like paid or volunteer work or carers' responsibilities on top of that. To know from the start of the year that you've only got 3 days a week where you have to attend is really handy. But the problem with it is it almost makes it sound like that's your only 3 days of work that's required. And we're about to see here that that is absolutely not true. You might only have a certain small number of learning activities, but you still have the 10 hours of learning per week for every single one of your units. You might already have done the maths too. If you've got 4 units and they all have 10 hours a week, that's 40 hours a week of study that you need to be doing, which is actually more than a full-time job. So let's take a look at this. Unit number 2. Again, this could be any unit that you want it to be. This is a little different. They have 1 hour of concept videos. This might be quite like a lecture, but it's chunked in smaller sections for you to watch. But nevertheless, you need to be watching it because that's where the content of your unit is being delivered, and that's how you can know what you're going to be assessed on. There's also a 1 hour tutorial and a 2 hour workshop. Again, these are general words for things you see at a lot of universities, but there are a bunch of different things you might have, and you need to check your own timetable. So this one's only got 4 hours of learning activities per week, which means there's another 6 hours of individual study or individual learning that needs to take place. I'll say too, this isn't arbitrary. When we design units, we really have to think about the volume of learning and volume of work and how we want to scaffold it for a student. So oftentimes, if there's more scaffolding required, there might be more face-to-face hours or real-time hours per week of learning activities, and then fewer individual learning hours yourself, or it might be flipped the other way, particularly as you get through more years of study. Some universities expect independent learning right from the word go, so you might only have a couple of hours of contact, but then you've actually got quite a lot of learning outside that you need to do. It's got to add up to 10. The other thing I'll say is, let's say you're coming into a unit where you've perhaps done a bit of the preparatory work already, maybe it will take you a few less than 10 hours a week. But vice versa, many people come into a unit without the assumed knowledge that perhaps is advertised for the unit. Let's say you come into an IT unit and you don't have the assumed knowledge of maths, or same with something like science or medicine, then that's going to be really challenging for you if you're heading into one of those units, because you're going to be having to catch up with the prerequisite knowledge as well as the content knowledge, and that'll be a lot more than 10 hours. So nevertheless, this one's got 4 hours a week of contact hours or face-to-face hours, or learning activities, that's another way to say it, but there's another 6 that the student's going to have to do by themselves. So here we go. I've got the videos here, there's a tute here and a workshop here, and I've just chucked in 3 hours here and 3 hours here. Again, not suggesting that's the only way to do it or even the best way to do it, but we really want to be visualizing all of the hours and not just those contact hours or those learning activity hours. Let's cut forwards to the 4 units. So here we go. I've put bold lines around the actual learning activities, the actual contact hours, and then I've put the rest of it, color-coded, is the study that you need to do for all of those units. Now you might see there's a couple of things that can be done here. So for example, on Friday at the moment, there's only 1 actual learning activity, and you might think, okay, well, let's say this student got in a bit earlier and timetabled straight away to get their preference. Maybe they could have put this workshop for their 4th unit, perhaps down here on a Thursday or up here on a Tuesday. Obviously, when I've scheduled the study, that's flexible. I've just stuck that in there wherever I can fit it. And And that could be really helpful, particularly if you're commuting and it takes you a long time. Kind of optimizing only fewer days when you've actually got to come in can be really helpful. And that might help this student actually work. Perhaps if they want to work for the whole day on Friday, they could. But you've got to note here that we're pretty much 9 till 5 or 9 till 6 even, every single day, because there are 40 hours of study. And those hours are really necessary. You kind of imagine you get behind 1 week and then don't do much study 1 week. The next week you have that week's 40 hours, and you also have the 40 hours from the week before, and that becomes 80 hours all of a sudden on just 1 week, just because you got behind just once. So I really hope that that is kind of really clear. Obviously you can spread it out at night, earlier in the morning, on the weekends, but you really want to make sure you've got enough time to be well as you're studying. Here's a student tip. Loads of the students I talk to at university say that they wish they'd known to consider their whole workload and study plan before starting their first semester, and not just think about those contact hours, and also that they should enroll as early as possible so that they can allocate into their timetable and get the best timetable to suit their preferences. If you're looking at it thinking, oh wow, I'm really overwhelmed, I can't possibly fit all of that in, you are absolutely not alone, and it is not a failure to decide that perhaps you want to spread some of your units out over perhaps a winter and a summer, or you might want to drop down to part-time, particularly in your first semester while you're finding your feet. I hope you found that video really helpful. It might have been a surprise to a lot of you watching, or it might have been obvious, but hopefully that method of study planning and putting everything on your timetable, including things like socialising or sport or things like that, that's a really important thing too. Stick them in there, but hopefully it really helps to visualise your workload. And hopefully you find you're finding out more things you need to know about uni. Happy studying.